Hello and welcome to First Flight, a Star Trek Enterprise rewatch podcast where we are watching and discussing each episode of Enterprise in succession. First Flight is a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions Network.
This is Commander Tucker of Enterprise. We've got some information you're going to want to hear.
Welcome, Enterprise fans. I'm your co-host, Chris.
And I'm your co-host, Abby.
My chronometer's running backwards, sir.
Incoming transmission.
You read my letter?
That soundbite this early in the show means only one thing. Welcome to our Mailbag episode of Season 2. We've been collecting your Porthos Picks, Grappler Ratings, and all other feedback from episodes 11 through 18 of Season 2 that we've covered so far. And we are here to discuss it and share some of our favorites.
We adore our First Flight community, and we have had some spirited and often humorous chats about many parts of this batch of episodes. So let's get into it. But before we begin our discussion, as always, we need to issue a read alert.
Tactical alert. All hands to stations.
There are potential spoilers ahead. In fact, there are just actual spoilers ahead. We might end up talking about any part of this series at any time, and we're definitely talking about these episodes. So you've been warned. Wait, what's that I hear?
That barking means we're starting with some of your favorite moments, your Porthos Picks. All right, so I'm going to start with one that I want to talk about, and it is a doozy from Monique Wistaff at Imzadi666422 from Twitter, one of our faithful commenters in the Carrot Crew. And
Woo-hoo.
This one's about Stigma, one of our favorite episodes to talk about from this batch. So we'll read bits of it and then kind of react to it because it's lengthy. So we'll go back and forth. Does that sound okay?
Perfect. Go for it.
All right. I love Monique's Porthos pick and all of her commentary about Stigma. So let's get into it. And she says, I love the Enterprise Vulcan arc that leads to the Vulcan we knew. Yes, Vulcan are more experienced in space, but there are things humans do better. Humans bring to the table far more than Vulcans want to admit. There are so many examples from Dawn and Stigma, but I think T'Pol sought refuge in the human ship because she was before her time. She had difficulties to fit into her corrupted, arrogant, tight-up Vulcan society, not only because of the emotions closer to the surface. She thought that humans could contribute to her people, too. Wow, there's a lot there about the whole Vulcan arc that really you see represented and blooming in this episode, Stigma. So what are your thoughts about Monique's thoughts there?
Oh, I love how she sums it up. And I think how she phrased it, that T'Pol was before her time. Like, how many times do you hear people now say that, oh, this was ahead of its time, this was before its time, or even people reaching back going, oh, that kid is an old soul. And to think of T'Pol as one of the people who's out of time in Vulcan, because, you know, if this was Picard's era or, you know, Janeway's era, then it wouldn't be something that we even blinked at. But for this one, it's unusual. And that was such a key moment that jumped out of that for me.
Yeah, and really the comment about that she has difficulty fitting into her corrupted, arrogant, you know, really emotionally constrained society is really interesting with what we see in season 4. So that's great little insight and connection there. And this would have been even more interesting if that whole Romulan ancestry came to fruition. But she continues and she kind of shifts topics there, saying, Squirming Trip is so adorable. Connor can play that so well. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, we could just leave that as, yep, you're 100% right.
Because I think we said very similar things when we covered Stigma. So totally agree there. Then she goes into something else about Phlox, when we love Phlox. So let's dive into it. Not a trivia per se, she says, but during interviews and panels, John likes to complain that Phlox got no action in 4 years. And when finally one of his wives came on board, she wanted to screw Trip.
Fair, very fair.
So
You hope
funny.
that they had some moments in there too, but yeah, that very fair, and I count that as great trivia. We have talked about things that John Billingsley has said on panels before because they're just too funny. The man is a gem, both as Phlox and as himself.
Yeah. His wife smells him, but wants to go after
Yep,
Trip.
yep.
That's so funny. All right, but now to her actual Porthos pick.
Yeah.
And she says it would be pushing it to give Connor Trinier again the pick. The hearing scene is Star Trek awesome. You humans are too volatile, too irrational, too narrow-minded, but we don't hold a candle to you when it comes to narrow-minded.
Ooh.
Yeah, and that was one of ours, I think, too. I mean, I don't remember whose, but that is the Star Trek moment right there.
It absolutely is, and it's even feels like a mic drop moment when you just read her comment quoting that. Like that's a
Yeah,
bunch of steps. That's the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon game right there. But it works because this is so good.
6 degrees of Carrot Crew.
Yeah, 6 degrees of Garrett Crew. I love it. All right, well, let's go to one of mine. I have one that I wanted to talk about that I just scrolled past. Hold on.
Oh, I thought we were gonna have a subspace fold moment here, and you started
Oh
singing.
no, nope, not singing. But I am going. Nope, we're just gonna leave that there. But I'm going to go to another friend of ours, Stuart McIlney. He's Darth Emerius on Instagram. I probably said that completely wrong. And he was talking about Future Tense, which is another episode that we
Mm.
absolutely adore. So that's a fun one that I wanted to make sure that I talked about. And he says, "Love this episode. Upon rewatching, I've decided that it easily and should have been made into a two-parter. My Porthos pick for this episode is when Archer's talking to the Suliban. Reed's in the hangar bay, so no one is at tactical. Early in his discussion with the Suliban captain, he gives T'Pol a look which means this is going to end badly. Get the weapons ready." She calmly walks over and assumes Malcolm's post without missing a beat. That is a gorgeous moment. And we talked about that a little bit in our talk about how we like this relationship and how well they know each other now. But
Mm.
that is the perfect moment to call out about that. And you are completely right that this is one of those moments where we see both of them shine with that unspoken. Very cool.
I love when even unnamed crew members just when like a senior officer gets up from their post and an unnamed crew member just slides right in.
Yep.
Like I just love that detail. I think I made a pick on Trek Ranks like on Twitter one time about that as being such an amazing part in the background that just makes it so real.
Yeah.
Like it actually
Yeah.
matters that the station is manned.
It feels like the universe is lived in.
Exactly. So yeah, that's a great pick. And of course, that again demonstrates how in sync Archer and T'Pol are.
Beautiful to see.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and read another one of my favorite Porthos picks from the Carrot Crew. And this one comes from Noelle, our friend, at Coffee Noel on Twitter. And she says this about Precious Cargo. One of my, like, I really have a soft spot for this episode now, honestly.
So do I.
Because we had so much fun talking about it. And the nightie. I mean,
Yeah,
that's a thing.
people
now.
are referencing the nightie all over the place and sending us comments
Yes.
referencing our joke about having an emergency night. Like, if this is my legacy now, food costumes and the emergency nightie, which kind of is the subset of costumes, I'm not sad. It's hilarious. Thank you, Carrot Crew, for thinking of us with emergency nighties in your escape pods.
As long as it's not an emergency holographic nightie that, if they lose power, whoa!
Oh my goodness. All right,
Anyway.
so Noelle said.
Yeah, she said, I hope sharing my Porthos pick before listening to the episode is allowed. Of course it is. It's the scene where Archer and T'Pol team up to creatively extract information from Plyn. Not only was it a clever ploy, but it was awesomely executed. T'Pol is resplendent in her Vulcan robes of judgment. Archer's whole performance, right down to his little bows to her, is perfect. Even the dim, empty mess hall contributes to the atmosphere. I swear it looks like Scott Bakula is having so much fun the whole time. Yeah, I mean, we talked about this scene, and I have to just praise you for using the word resplendent in a tweet.
Yes, it is excellent, robust vocabulary there. Much appreciated.
Vulcan robes of judgment are capitalized in her text there, so that's fantastic too. That's how I'm going to think about them from now on.
Yeah, and I love that they just play into it so well. And again, we were just talking about how we had another pick about their relationship. They could not have done this season one because they
Mhm.
didn't have the relationship that allowed them to over exaggerate like this, but make it
Yes.
feel real. So that it's just fun. And it's such a great character building moment in there, even though they're completely out of character.
Oh, it is. And you're right. You're right, Noel. Scott Bakula is just having so much fun. And Jolene Blaylock is as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So do you have another one?
I do have one more. And this is again from our friend Monique, who thankfully and wonderfully sends us one every single time. So double gold stars and a carrot ball for you, Monique.
A
But
golden
this is
carrot ball.
a golden carrot ball. There we go. So all right, and this is about ceasefire, another one that we really enjoy. And I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit here and just pull out two parts that I thought really she nailed on the head. She started with great episode, another building block in the Federation history. Love, maybe we're out here to prove that humanity is ready to join a much larger community. That's why the Romulans will start a war with Earth. Unifying Vulcan and Doria Teller is not good for them. I also love the conversations between T'Pol and Saval about her job with humans. You can see that this became more than a job to her. It is a loyalty to those humans in particular, but to the human race too. It explains why she will follow them into the expanse soon. So I'm going to pause there because that was so beautifully stated, Monique. You're right.
Yeah.
And we have said how much we love that the founding of the Federation building blocks are thrown in these first couple of seasons of Enterprise where you don't expect them. And they're just so well done. And to see these very small steps that we know are going to lead up to such an enormous thing is beautiful. And one of those important steps, one of those links is T'Pol. We've said that the Federation would not be here if it wasn't for both Archer and T'Pol, because they needed that link to start that bridge between the Vulcans, the Andorians, and the humans, and then pulling in those Tellarite later. It's perfect. So very well said.
Yeah, and that scene starts turning Saval, right? She's re-educating him or giving him a different perspective in this episode, which again has a great payoff when he's clapping, right? In Terra Prime.
Terra Prime.
Yeah, one of the Terras. But yeah, this is great. So you want to I think she has more in her commentary.
She does. She has a Porthos pick I'm going to actually get to since we're in that section. And she said her Porthos pick, trip in command, finally, all caps again. Yep. And they say, we now see why he has earned those 3 pips on his uniform. We knew that the guy is very bright, easygoing, caring, faithful, great team leader. But even if these are great qualities, they don't justify the 3 pips. He can command.
That's a great point.
And we see later on, like when Troy takes the commander's test, that it requires some really deep soul searching. So I'm not sure that's the same thing they had back then, but she's right. He's a commander for a reason. And I love seeing him shine like this, not just as an engineer, but as a commander. So well said, Monique.
That makes me think of Beverly in Descent as well. Like she's more than a doctor.
Yes. Yep. I agree.
Great comments, Monique.
Okay, so one time Boimler dragged me to the Starship History Museum.
Dragged? You ran up to the doors.
No, I didn't. It was boring. I hated it. Anyway, so they had the NX-01 there, Archer's Enterprise.
Yeah, classic design. Plus it had, the grapplers.
Skip that part. They don't care.
I love grapplers.
See?
All right.
Okay, so we got a great selection of Grappler ratings too. So Abby, what is one that stuck out to you?
All right. So I love the grappler ratings, and I know how hard the
Mm.
grappler ratings can be. So I had to put one out here that is from our very beloved friend and co-host Emerita Melanie at ShuttlePod2 on Twitter. And she was talking about Canamar, which I thought was really interesting because that's one of those ones that isn't one of that ones that stood out for us. But I loved what she said. Great podcast episode. Thanks, Melanie. Surprisingly, I enjoyed Canamar more than I have in the past. Some really good stuff there. Always great to see T'Pol in command with her calmness, immense competence, poise, and strength. Love the dramatic ending also. My grappler rating, 6.5 out of 10. So no surprise, she's
Mm.
pretty on par with us. But again, look at what's coming up in these. We're seeing the repetition of we love seeing more people taking command, stepping up, getting featured, showing their strength. And
Mm.
beautiful there. That's a great way to describe T'Pol in command, that she's calm, she is immensely competent, and she has poise and strength. Absolutely. Like, I wouldn't mess with T'Pol in command. No way.
There's another trend here that we're seeing, that we just love seeing these people being good at their jobs, the competence,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And excelling beyond just being competent. And that is fascinating if you really think about a difference between like this era of Star Trek and the current era. There's a lot more brokenness, lack of competence in the main characters we're looking at and examining, even in the Picard characters, right?
Yeah.
Picard is shown as less competent in Star Trek Picard, and flawed. And I like both, but there is something really special about just watching people that are really good at their job.
I 100% agree. It's calming to see people in situation.
It's reassuring.
Yes, reassuring. That's a good way to put it. For sure. Reassuring to see people who are good at their jobs doing their jobs.
Especially in the time that we live, a lot of uncertainty in our just real world.
Yes.
I think that's why
Yes.
Strange New Worlds really hits well.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Because the characters are all just very competent.
And okay with not always being the expert, but knowing who is and going to them, which is a strength in itself.
Absolutely.
All right. So now, before we leave Porthos and Grappler ratings, we had to give a golden carrot ball as well to a wonderful member of our carrot crew, Mike Capella, since twice he sent in feedback that had both Porthos picks and Grappler ratings. So, Chris, we're going to let you read out each of these that have the doubles. And thank you so much, Mike. These are always so much fun to get. And we love that you gave us both. You are always welcome to send either both. We love it.
Hey guys, this is a lot of work. Like, this is some great thought put into these comments, and unfortunately we can't like read every comment that we've gotten because this would be 4 hours. But but we're really touched and moved that you guys took the time to just put your thoughts about Star Trek Enterprise, a show that we love, and we love sharing these out here. So, 2 Porthos picks and Grappler ratings. We love grapplers from Mike Capella. The first one's on Stigma. So Stigma is a really good episode, he says. As someone who didn't see this series until years later on Netflix, I didn't even connect this to an allegory to the AIDS epidemic. The same for the 9/11 connection to the Xindi plot. With that being said, as was mentioned in the podcast, this episode is done so well that the message isn't locked in on one allegory. It could be connected to multiple things. Another thing this episode showcases is how the Vulcans are in the Enterprise time period. I actually like the way the Vulcans are portrayed in this series. I know that was something people didn't like, but I think it is something the series always did well. Could Archer's speech be considered to be too on the nose? Perhaps. But sometimes a message needs to be slapped into your face. I'll take that as my Porthos pick. Well said, Mike. And Mike gave this 8.5 out of 10 grapplers. So way up there like us. Abby, what are your thoughts about Mike's thoughts on Stigma?
Well, I really like how he thought deeply about it and connected it to other parts of Enterprise with the Xindi arc and everything, and then
Yeah.
also connected it to the real world. And he's right. The fact that it is broad enough to be applicable 25 years ago and to now, and probably sadly will be still in the future,
Hmm.
that means it's a good message. And I like how he summed that up. And we've talked a lot about the Vulcans and what we think about them. And I think, like I said, it is interesting to see species develop.
Yes.
Nobody stays the same. We are not the same as we were even 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Of course, they're not going to be the same. It's the how you get there that's really the interesting part. That's where the
Hmm.
stories are. So, thank you for pointing that out, Mike. And I would like to say that, we were just talking about people being competent. Our listeners are so
Yes.
competent and putting together such beautiful thoughts. So, that's calming and reassuring as well that you guys are out there thinking about Enterprise as much as we are.
Yeah. And I was one of those that wasn't crazy about the Vulcan portrayal, but man, looking back at it, it's such a brave narrative move by the creators of the show that
Mm-hmm.
they don't get enough credit as risk takers, right? Because sometimes like
Yep.
season one of Enterprise is seen as kind of just like the same old stories recycled from other shows, but really they were taking some great risk by making the Vulcans not comfortably Vulcan, right? They're very
Right.
arrogant. So, yeah,
Yes.
great point. I hadn't thought about that in this particular way. So, now his second episode that he gave us a Porthos and a Grappler was for Ceasefire. So, Ceasefire is one of the must watch episodes of Enterprise, he says. The founding of the Federation was something I wish we got more of, Tellarites being the least seen. My Porthos pick is the Enterprise getting in between. So, that's between the Vulcan ship and the Andorian
Mm-hmm.
ships, right? Oh, yeah, that was
Mm-hmm.
awesome. Totally cool. Love those ship designs. And I think I agree with his grappler rating 8.5 out of 10. So, two high ratings for Mike. Thank you, Mike, for sending those in. Those are some great Porthos picks and grappler ratings.
Yeah, and here again, we're touching on another theme that seems to be reaching not just us, but a lot of the people who listen to us is we love the founding of the Federation. Look at
Yeah,
this. Wish we had more of it. We wish we had seen what the plans were. And yeah, I would love to have seen the Tellarites more too.
absolutely.
Mind if we take a look? Prettiest set I ever saw.
All right. So speaking of that particular moment that was his Porthos pick, we have just one because we just started this, our newest segment called Viewscreen On, where we pick a beautiful moment or scene or shot or visual from the episode and talk it up. And our friend Noelle, who we've heard from before this episode, picked that exact moment as her view
Oh,
screen on. Yeah, she says, I love the new view screen segment. I have a submission for this episode. The beautifully composed and rendered shot of the Vulcan ship, the Andorian ship, and Enterprise between them like a link. A plus design. So how cool is that?
oh.
Yeah.
I didn't think of them being a bridge between them, right?
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of a wall, they're the bridge. That was perfectly put. And it just dovetails so nicely into Mike there. So bravo, Carrot Crew. Look at you helping us out to make this a great episode.
It's structuring itself.
It sure
That's
is.
not true. Abby has done a lot of work on this. Got to
Oh,
give her credit
well,
there.
thank you very much. But we couldn't do this if you guys didn't talk to us. So we appreciate, again, all the interactions for sure.
And we can't wait to get more view screen on. I love that section.
Yeah.
Again, that Abby, you added that to this the show, and it's a really fun little moment that we get to pick out something fun. So give us some view screen on submissions.
Yeah, we had one that was already submitted for an episode that's like months and months ahead of time because the person was like, I know I'm going to pick this, so I'm just telling you now. So if that is something that you would like to do as well, I promise we're eventually getting to all the episodes. So if you've got something jumping out, send it in now. I will put you in the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
All right, so let's dive into some more comments that we loved. We got a bunch about the evolution of the relationships between our crew and crew members, just like we've been talking about already. So here's some of them that we each enjoyed. And Chris, why don't you start this time?
Yeah, I got a comment from Brian Davis at Brian Davis 10640000 on Twitter. And Brian's comment is on Canamar. So let me just read out his comment here. He says, I love Star Trek Enterprise's second season episode, Canamar. And I love that there's someone out there that loves Canamar because there's definitely things to love about it.
Yeah.
And he's highlighting, I think it's the Archer quote from the episode. Archer says, my engineer and I were falsely arrested, almost wound up in Canamar. Makes me wonder how many others don't belong there. You wanted a report? This societal commentary is a Trek moment. It's an abrupt end with a darker tone than most Enterprise episodes. That's very true. I like that. I just love the way T'Pol observes the Enolian and then also briskly walks away. Archer's interest and sympathy for Kuroda's life story and attempt to save him also qualifies as Star Trek moments for me. Anyways, thanks. LOL. Thank you for the comment, Brian. And I totally agree. This does end on a dark note. And some of the best episodes of Star Trek end you feeling uneasy, right? And that's definitely one of them.
Yeah, and I really liked how he pointed out to Paul in that one because we both noticed that too. Like, she doesn't have to say a thing. Again, this is that unspoken where she just gives him the look and turns around and leaves, hands behind her back, like, yep, too bad. We're not even walking you to the shuttle bay. Like,
just get
adios.
out.
Exactly. So it was just interesting that was one that really struck him, and I love that he loves Canamar, and I love that the seaweed stroking did not turn him off to our podcast. So that it's always fun.
Yeah, it is, and I love that he really latched on to Archer's interest and sympathy for Kuroda, and that for him is a Star Trek moment, which for me it could have been, and I think it's a really interesting moment in that episode. So thank you again, Brian. I love that you pointed that out.
And I love that he made us think. And it's perfect because the next one that I have is actually kind of a back and forth between two listeners about the crossing. And it's between Monique, who we've talked about previously, and then Eva Kate, who's at Eva Rock to Rose on Twitter. And then Monique comes back in again. So I'm just going to read the whole thing and then we can go back and talk about it. So for anyone who doesn't remember, this is the one where they have the wisps kind of come into their bodies. And there's a lot of really interesting points that they made here. So Monique starts with an episode where you can see the change in Archer and the crew. They now have suspicion right from the start, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. On season 1, they would have been excited and giddy about meeting new life and would probably have been stuck with their pants down. These aliens give them very little choice. They already started replacing them before negotiation was even an option. They would have let them die on that ship at their place. Totally agree about Phlox. He is the hero and was everybody's punching bag this episode. And then Trip is surrounded by Elizabeth with a question mark. His sister, his girlfriend. I think the writers were a little unimaginative here. Love Ross. All right, so lots of little pieces in there, but the part that stands out was that the aliens gave them very little choice. Negotiation wasn't even an option, which is a really fair point. And then Eva responded with, if my captain said, would you mind if this alien you never met takes complete control of your body, your memories for 24 hours? I would say no. And I was like, what if enough crew members refuse to give their bodies over to a soul they don't know? I think by law of averages, there would be a fair amount who would refuse. I'm all for peace and understanding, don't get me wrong. But, and then Monique responds with, don't forget that when they took possession of someone, their essence/soul were out of the body. They would have let them die on that ship at their place, in their place. So, yeah, really interesting here.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that part. That these aliens weren't just taking their bodies, but also killing the crew's wisps in the end.
Yeah. I mean, that was so interesting. And I mean, I have two daughters, and I'm already talking to them about, nobody does anything to you that you don't want.
Mm-hmm.
You consent. We're talking about it now. So it is just, part of who they
Mm-hmm.
are.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very big episode when you think about it from the consent way. Like,
Yeah.
it totally changes it. And I spent a lot of time thinking about these comments after they came in and going, yeah, I wonder if I watch this one again, which I haven't since because life, but
Mm-hmm.
if I watch this again and think about it from that lens, from the consent lens and the violation feel of it, and it reminded me a little bit of people having the right to say no, and then people still keep going. And it was a
Mm.
lot like Mbenga at the end of Under the Cloak of War in Strange New Worlds, where he keeps
Mm-hmm.
saying, please go away, please go away. I wish you weren't here.
Yeah.
Go away. He's giving the chance for this to end. And then his consent was not given to be in that place. And then something happened and he had no choice in the matter. And like, it, in my opinion, I know that's a great episode at the end, but just the whole idea of the Wisps forcing them and the death of those people back in their ship that was then going to explode totally changed how I looked at this. It's much more menacing now.
Yeah, like my problem with it was that there was no attempt on the Starfleet crew to reach out and trying to find a different solution. I feel differently now. Like it
Yeah.
feels a lot more justified exterminating that threat because of they were forcing themselves
Mm-hmm.
into the crew's body.
Yeah.
Very different kind of take. Very different. So
Yeah.
thank you. This conversation has changed the episode for me.
Absolutely. I'm never going to watch it the same way. So go
It,
Carrot Crew. You are influencing us and I love it.
even when I read these tweets on Twitter, it didn't hit me the same way until now. So great.
Well, what's interesting is when these came through, I think I went in and commented, oh my God, we are totally talking about this on the next mailbag, because it was like a day after and I was still thinking about it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that is so
Yeah.
true. So bravo, Monique and Eva, you really helped us have a new perspective. And that's so cool. That's what this is all about.
Yeah. So when we redo the show and go through the series again, who knows what our grapplers? I'm just kidding.
Well, at the end of each season, Melanie and I decided we could change one grappler rating. So we have one pass at the end of the season to go back and either
Yeah.
put something up or down, depending on when you look back and you kick yourself and go, man. And I had never thought that this would be the one that I would go back and think about. I'm still kind of hanging on to my Marauders feelings, but
Yeah.
I have thought about this so much since then. It might be my do-over. I'm gonna have to see when we get to that point.
I'm excited for that one.
All right, so Chris, you have one more comment for us about relationships, yes?
I do, from Noelle again. All right, so Noelle's comments are centered on ceasefire. And she says, of course, you all inspired me to rewatch the episode itself. A great installment, 10 out of 10 grapplers for me. Oh, we got grapplers there. I
Yep.
agree with all of your pros and have a couple or few more. Like the officers discussing the mission over a meal instead of in a conference room. Pretty uniquely Enterprise. That's totally true.
Mm-hmm. Strange New Worlds might give them a run for their money, but Enterprise still takes the cake on that one.
True.
Sorry.
Takes the cake. Carrot cake?
Couldn't help myself. Takes the carrot cake. You got it.
Just about 7 minutes into the episode, Archer flashes the quickest little grin at Trip when Saval begrudgingly says Shran finds Archer trustworthy. Love that moment too.
Oh, yeah.
And speaking of face acting wins, to Paul's face when Archer says, we're just going to have to play it by ear.
Yes.
It's a great performance by Jolene Blaylock, which reminds me, I heartily second the appreciation for expressive Andorian antennae.
Woo.
They really do add a lot. Whoever was working them and or directing how they should go, they did a fantastic job. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. The best part about this Andorian makeup and Enterprise is those antennas, and with the way they droop, and it's there's no poker face with these Andorians because you watch their antennas like a dog tail, which sounds demeaning, but it's really not, because it's so cool that they have to be open and honest because they can't bluff. their antenna give them away. And it's beautifully done. And I wonder how much practice the person who controlled the robotic antenna had with the actor before him. Like, did they go through and when they were blocking the scenes,
Oh
practice what they
yeah.
were going to do or watch them? Like, it's a whole nother layer to this that I would just be fascinated to learn about.
But knowing how noisy those are, do they have
Yeah,
to loop every
they
scene?
probably do.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know. All right, so moving on because we're going to get to one of my favorite parts now. This would not be a First Flight podcast if I didn't talk about costumes a little bit. And Noelle has picked up on some of this, and she's encouraging me to make a list of all the things that I call costumes. So I'm going to give you two quick ones there, and then one more from somebody else that kind of all go together. So the first one that Noelle has mentioned in Precious Cargo, and we were just talking about this about the emergency nighty, and she says, y'all, this might be the funniest episode of First Flight Pod yet, season 2 yet. Between flocks parading around with a sousaphone, still one of my personal favorites too, Abby interjects. Abby introducing me to the term Kirk Fu, Chris's jaded Chakotay impression. I laughed hard enough for it to almost count as an ab workout.
Oh,
Thanks, Noelle.
jeez.
That means a lot to us. I'm glad that we're funny to someone besides just us. She continues, now joining the I'm No Vulcan headband and belly bro shirt in the ranks of First Flight Trekwear is the emergency escape pod nighty and maybe the Vulcan robes of judgment. So I
Yes.
love how she's picking up on our little names, and it's just too funny. And then she goes on when in Ceasefire and says, please add cleavage military outfits to the summer enterprise clothing collection list. And I'm like, yep, I appreciate that. So I love that she picked up on both of those. And then one more before I'm done with these, because it kind of goes all together. It's from our friend Michael at Michael Angie on Twitter. And he says, I never liked T'Pol's pajamas, so very un-Vulcan somehow. And if they absolutely had to emphasize a woman actor's sexual attractiveness, which of course they didn't, a long loose t-shirt works for me every single time. And I just wanted to give him some special shout out and applause because we had all the love here and then those Vulcan pajamas. Seriously, so many good things, and then here they are. So thank you to both of you for the comments and for making me laugh. And I'm all
Yes.
on that big t-shirt for a nightgown kind of thing. So I would have loved her in a robe, in a big t-shirt, in something like that. A simple belted kind of long roby shirt. Perfect.
Yes. And connecting to that, I have a comment here from Stuart again. This time he commented on Facebook, and he said, I have to agree with you both on everything you said regarding Paul's PJs. So we're back to that. They never came across as particularly Vulcan to me. For one thing, they were several sizes too small, which isn't very logical and extremely revealing. Yeah, I never thought about the illogic of their size, but totally.
Sorry, that just made me giggle because you're right, they are just too small.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're on a desert planet, so maybe skimpier clothes is logical. I don't know, but she's in space; it's cold. But then the rest of his comment, I was like, yes, he gets us. He says, I know Chris loves a good Voyager comparison, so when you look at Tuvok sleepwear, he's virtually Victorian and not showing any skin whatsoever in Club Tuvok. And it's totally true. I mean,
Tuvok, yeah,
he included, Tuvok's full like gown robe with shoulder pads, the classic Vulcan shoulder pads, which is totally in character for Vulcans and Tuvok. Where's T'Pol's shoulder pads?
Well, and really the only thing that's the same about those two outfits is that they're both made with shiny fabric. Like, other than that, there's really not that much. So, but could you imagine? Now I'm picturing, like, I would love T'Pol in Tuvok type robes.
Yes.
Do I want Tuvok in T'Pol type pajamas? Like, do I want him in like a little Vulcan, like, boxer briefs or something? I'm not sure the answer is yes, and that is nothing against Tim Russ, who is a very handsome man. Vulcan should wear logical pajamas. 100% right there. I
There
am
is
on
that
board with
time
that.
that he was walking around the corridors naked in a dream, right?
It is true. That is true. Well, they come from a hot planet. Maybe they're warm sleepers or something.
That sounds about right. Either way, I think we know that her pajamas were only there for one reason,
Yep.
and it was not a good enough reason.
It was not a good enough reason.
So let's segue into some comments that don't quite fit in one of these categories. So we just have a few to share.
Absolutely, I do. And I have two here that came from Ceasefire. And the first one was from Christopher Collins, who is STC_Eagle on Instagram, another place that you can find us. And he said, Ceasefire is my favorite episode of Enterprise and a favorite Andarian episode in Star Trek. So I just had to call that out because, yeah, that if you boiled down the essence of what we said in our big old long episode, that's it. It's a great episode. It's one of the best Andarian episodes. Beautifully done. I love that you found the heart of that. And I couldn't let this one go because we have this season found our haiku vibe, and our wonderful co-host Emerita Melanie sent in her own haiku for Ceasefire, and it's
Oh,
beautiful. So here we go. I hope I do it justice. Archer brokers peace. Shran shows his integrity. Soval comes around.
oh, that's perfect.
Gorgeous. I know. And I give her double props as someone who's worked on these haikus and is annoyed that most of the main characters' names take up
Yes.
2 or more syllables. And she had a name in every single line. So that is, you get double golden carrot balls from me for that because I know how hard that is.
And 2 out of 3 names had multi-syllabic
Yes.
names.
Yes, absolutely. And again, she distilled what we said for an hour into these syllables of a haiku so perfectly.
Wow. That's why she's the founder of First Light.
Absolutely. All right, so what do you have that didn't fit a category, Chris?
All right. Well, we have another comment on Precious Cargo, a popular episode.
You know, the ones that people like to deride seem to be the ones that people want to talk about the most, and that is okay.
Yeah. So this comes from L Bond on Instagram at Linux. All right. L Bond says, this episode gets so much flack. I just enjoy watching it. It was a fun romp. It's totally true.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely is a fun romp if you just kind of put it on in the background, right?
Just go with it and enjoy the soundtrack.
Yep. Yes. I wasn't going to bring up the soundtrack this time because I bring it up all the time, but you did it. And I love that. So then I want to go to Facebook, a comment from Ingel Wenzel. And this is on Canamar. And Ingel says, Canamar is another wise lesson from Archer on how to respond in certain situations. Sometimes it's not okay, and you must say something. And I think that is a wise piece of advice for all of us to take into our lives. Speak up.
Absolutely. I love how all of these ones are just so succinct and perfect. And I know maybe some of that is just character count and people are trying to get it in, but wow, our listeners distill right down to the heart of everything. And it's just really neat to see. I love hearing those thoughts and how you guys put everything together in such a nice, tight little package.
Well, and it helps frame the episode for us in a slightly different way or a more concise way. And so, you know, someone can tell you something about an episode that changes your experience of it. And
absolutely.
I'm grateful for that. One more little comment I'll throw out from David McDonald from Facebook. He wrote that Strange New Worlds has paid respect to Enterprise multiple times, more than once in those old scientists. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the legacy of Enterprise is only now really starting to bleed into the larger universe. And I really can't wait to see what more comes of Enterprise throughout future series, episodes, movies of Star Trek.
Yeah, there's some really interesting theories out there about ways that it's going to come back around. And I know that our friend Alex Perry has a really interesting one that he
Mm.
talks about that it's going to get tripped back from the dead, which is beautiful. And
Oh,
I appreciate even modern Trek like Discovery. They
yes.
had Archer Station and they played
Yeah.
Archer's theme in the last
Yes.
season of Discovery, season 4. Are people rediscovering and realizing that Enterprise is a gem that a lot of people did not understand at the time or weren't ready for at the time. And now you look back and it holds up, as you can see from what we've been discussing for almost 2 seasons now.
Well, more than that, I think the current creators who are also fans recognize that every single part of the franchise is worthy, even including the animated series, right?
Yeah.
Has
Oh
come
yeah.
back in force. So
Yeah.
if TAS can come back, Enterprise surely deserves to be referenced and inspiring future stories going forward.
Absolutely. All right, now I don't have any actual carrot balls to discuss this episode, though I have handed out a few golden carrot balls, which means absolutely nothing to anyone outside of our listeners. But I do have another awesomely hilarious, only on Enterprise musing that our friend Thad from the Infinite Diversity podcast started after seeing a screenshot from Ceasefire. This one seems to be coming up a lot tonight, too. It was a screenshot that I took of Saval's bare leg over his sock as he walks through a door. He's in his full robes, but they kind of split just enough. And for that one screenshot, you can see he's wearing calf-length socks on his bare leg. Well, I just thought it was funny. And Thad started this whole thing where he says, do you think he's wearing Vulcan underwear or just freeballing under that robe? Which was a statement in itself. But of course, I had to reply and said, oh, I'm sure there is complex Vulcan underwear. And he writes back, it's only logical. And I write back, it's likely very geometric as well. And then our friend Kara Amons comes in and says, the term Vulcan and freeballing in the same tweet just broke my brain. And that is where I said, we are talking about this on our Mailbag show. And here we are talking about it on the Mailbag show. You can hear from my voice that this was so funny. And I had not even taken it to that level. But as soon as we did, all I can imagine is what the heck? We have actually talked a little bit about possible Vulcan underwear before. And here it is again now, worrying about what is Saval wearing under there. And it is the most full coverage traditional Vulcan underwear, which just leads you down so many rabbit holes that we don't have time for. But I am sorry, not sorry that I have given this out to a wider universe now. And I will make sure that I post this screenshot with this mailbag, or it could again be the mailbag episode screenshot. So
Yes.
yeah, you will see here. The carrot balls made the episode art last time, maybe Saval's bare leg. And I'm so sorry, Gary Graham, for all of this if it gets back to you.
Do Saval's underwear have his name in Vulcan script written on them?
Oh my god, I hope so. I hope so much. Oh, that would be too funny.
His mother sewed them in,
Well, Vulcan clothes are so ornamental and so
Yes.
layered and detailed, and the fabrics are so rich that whatever it is, it's going to be pretty and it's going to be fairly comfortable and it's going to be kind of luxurious looking. So
Mhm.
I am curious, not curious enough to type that into a Google search, but
Nope.
curious in my head.
Oh, gosh.
So thank you, Thad, for that. You have now infected the brains of so many other people, and I will never watch Ceasefire without thinking about Saval's underwear now.
just Vulcan and freeballing now. I mean, it's so
Ooh.
okay. So I currently have a list I did not know I would be tracking throughout this episode. Vulcan headband, belly bro shirt, emergency escape pod nighty, Vulcan robes of judgment, and now what are we calling these? Vulcan underwear?
Sure. I mean, what else? We've talked about the Vulcan anti-gravity bras, right? Because
That's true.
T'Pol seems to have T'Pol and Tamir have those a lot. So I perhaps we can just make a category of Vulcan undergarments.
Well, maybe Vulcan males need anti-gravity underwear too.
Oh,
Okay, let's move on.
I think that's the end of where I want that road to go.
My chronometer's running backwards, sir.
Incoming transmission.
You read my letter?
Yep, you heard it again. We're bookending this episode with Daniels. As you noticed from the fun we had in this episode, we want to remind you that we adore getting feedback and thoughts from you, the listeners. We've had lots of chats on social media with so many of you about freeballing Vulcans and love sharing some of our favorite tidbits. So again, this is your invitation to send us any Grappler ratings, Porthos Picks, Viewscreen On moments, or general comments. And Thad, I'm blaming you for turning me into a middle school boy. Please get them to us so you can be part of our next mailbag episode.
Yes, please do reach out to us and share any thoughts or smiles that you have for us. Obviously, we enjoy them deeply. I mean, my face hurts from laughing recording
Me too.
this. And I really want to know what will be the next Carrot Balls or Vulcan freeballing. What is the end of this season going to bring
What's
us?
the next ball? The ball's in your court, everyone.
Oh, this is bad. Again, I'm sorry, but not sorry. So if you have the next time we will have a ball talking about it,
Yes.
you can reach us at First Flight Pod on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and hopefully by the time this drops, Blue Sky and Mastodon. We are also on YouTube under the Tricorder Transmissions Network. You can reach me personally at Abby M. Summer, both on Blue Sky, Mastodon, and Twitter or X or whatever it's called. Chris, what's the best place to reach you?
You can find me on Twitter at Shelf Nerds or on YouTube. Completing the Shelf is my channel. And we want to thank you so much for spending this time with us. Hopefully you're laughing along and it's just like a bunch of Star Trek friends hanging out.
Yep.
We'll be back next time with Judgment, the 19th episode of season 2. And we cannot wait for that one.
Oh, it's going to be so good.
But as always, we will leave you with this quote from Captain Jonathan Archer and your moment of Melanie.
The most profound discoveries are not necessarily beyond that next star. They're within us, woven into the threads that bind us, all of us, to each other.
Oh, I finally listened to Trek Rank's Strange New Worlds recap.
Isn't it fun?
Like I didn't listen to it because I didn't want Strange New World season 2 to be done, but now it's
Oh. It's gonna be done for a while now.
Yeah.
This is such a bummer.
But it hit me while I was listening to it. I tweeted it out today, or I posted whatever, that I really am on board for the legacy characters to complete the 5-year mission once they get to that time period. Like they skip ahead. Like
Interesting.
Like I wasn't okay with anything like that before now, but now we got Scotty, we got, and all the casting is great, and let's not waste the casting.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know.
Yeah.
Or between TMP and Wrath of Khan or something. I don't know.
It's a fun time period to play around in, for sure.
I mean, how awesome would it be to get the rest of that 5-year mission leading up to TMP? I mean, have you seen Star Trek Continues?
I have, yes.
They did it, and I thought they did it wonderfully.
I think they did too. Yeah.
I was obsessed with that show. I mean, it made me really fall in love with TOS in a different way.
Aww.
But okay.
Oh, before we're off TOS, real quick, do you want to hear my funny Captain Kirk story?
Oh, yes, please. Yes.
Okay, so um, when I went to Mission Chicago, they gave out lanyards, and they had pictures. Like they had a picture of Shatner, like an older Shatner. Probably it might have even been Generations. It was an older Shatner. They had a picture of like Michael Burnham, Mariner Boimler, Murph. Like they're just cool, right?
Yeah.
Lots
yeah.
of people on them. And so I got one. They had plenty of extras the last day. I said, "Do you care if I take some of these for my kids?" They're like, "No, please. We have thousands of them still. Take these lanyards." So my daughter found hers in some corner of her closet, and she pulls it out and she's looking at it. I'm like, just watching. She comes over. She goes, "Okay, I know who everybody is except this guy." And she pointed to Old Kirk, and I realized, oh well, she hasn't really seen any of the movies. She's seen TOS, everything. And I said, "Oh, that's
Mm.
Admiral Kirk." And she goes, "Wait a minute, that guy who was dancing with Una becomes this guy?" And I was like, "Yeah,
Ah.
remember how we talked about he's then becomes William Shatner, who was in TOS?" And she's just like, "That's the same guy." It
I
blew her
love
mind.
that.
Like it absolutely floored her. I thought it was so cool. And like she's still chewing on it. And every once in a while I get a question about which ship is the Enterprise? And I'm like, well, that's a big question because there's so many ships in Enterprise. Yes, there are. You're right. So, but it was just funny to see her make connections because she probably has, because we've watched Subspace Rhapsody so many times,
hmm
she's probably seen more of that Kirk than she has any other Kirk. So it's just interesting. I'm like, oh, we got some movies to watch, but she's just getting to the point where she's ready for some of that. So I
Yeah.
don't want to overwhelm her with some of that. I mean, the movies have some trippy parts in them. So
Yeah. I was watching The Bounty today. Because I'm making my way through Picard season 3. Oh, it's so good.
I just started a whole Picard rewatch the other night. So
Ooh, I'm
I'm
envious. You get to hang out with Soji.
yes, I
Yeah.
do. And I get to hang out with Elnor, who I just want to hug all the
Yes.
time.
Yes.
So, all right, keep going. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. And the kids are just playing, and Moriarty comes on. And my son stops dead in his tracks, terrified. Totally
Mm-hmm.
terrified. You know that little scared little boy face,
Oh
or
yeah.
little kid face.
Yeah.
Ooh. I'm like, it's gonna be okay. He's not real.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, that surprised me because we were watching Hegemony or I can't say it anymore.
Hegemony.
Hegemony. Hegemony. Um, and they were totally fine with the Gorn. Not scared at all.
That's just funny. But you know, it's a different kind of thing when it's someone who looks like you who's scary because that makes it feel more real. Like you're not going to really encounter a Gorn, at least not that we know of. You know,
Yeah,
walking down the street, and you could encounter someone like Moriarty, a
that's
creepy
true.
looking old dude.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's when you think about it from the kid's point of view, and
yeah.
people that he characters he knew and cared about are in danger, so that heightens it even more. So
Exactly. Exactly. But man,
interesting.
who knew that Riker had perfect pitch? I just love that little
I
detail.
know. It's so cool. You know what else is cool? I was watching a Frame of Mind last night,
Mm.
and they reference the Gorn hegemony in there and they say hegemony, and I have never picked that up before until now that
What?
I've said it about 500 times.
In
Yeah,
Frame of
they're
Mind?
in Frame of
Is it the
Mind.
crazy girl with the spoon?
I maybe can't remember now, but I remember last night because I was like headed out in the background while I was working on this, and I perked up and I was like, "Wait, what?" And I skipped back 10 seconds and went, "Yeah, they really did." And now I can't remember who it was because I was kind of only half focused. But I'm gonna watch. I'm watching it because I'm gonna go record Crusher Convo next weekend. So this
Oh,
is
good.
the stats on my track of the month this month are going to be insane because
Yeah.
I'm going to have guested on 3 podcasts.
Yes.
So just saying.
That's awesome.
It's when it rains, it pours, but I'm excited.
One last thing. My kids were talking about, oh yeah. Oh, this was perfect because I was like, oh, I gotta tell Abby about this. With Bounty, the kids saw the Titan,
Mm.
and I said something about how that'll be another that eventually it's gonna be called the Enterprise. And my daughter says, why are there so many ships called Enterprise? Just like
Yeah.
I
Yep.
just laughed thinking about your daughter saying the same thing.
My God. I hope someday our kids get to play together, and I hope
Yeah.
we get to both
Yes.
eavesdrop on what they're playing because I think it is going to absolutely melt our hearts. And both of our spouses are going to be like, "Well, we're glad that makes you happy," because they're not going to understand some of it, and we're just going to be like, "That is so deeply cool."
Yeah, because my son has the Enterprise F model, Eagle Moss. And
Nice.
he has the Academy training shuttle that, from the first duty.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I had one of those. He's like, that's awesome. I'm like, all right, well, I'm getting you one. and, and then she has a Shenzhou.
Oh, cool.
And because, female captain, and I had it
Yeah.
already. I'm not crazy about that ship, but I gave it to her. And she said, today, I want the Janeway ship. And I'm like, oh gosh, now I gotta get her a Voyager.
Oh darn.
But if I plan to get the Voyager XL, so when I get that, if I get it, I'll give her my regular size Voyager. Because
That's cool.
my daughter needs a Voyager for sure.
Well, my daughters needed shuttles. So we got some deliveries of like school supply stuff. They came in
Mhm.
bigger boxes because we ordered a chunk of stuff.
Mhm.
So they each got a big Amazon box and they have been working on them for days, turning them into shuttles. And
Oh,
I'm
cool.
going to take pictures and post it when they are done because they're so like my older one has a screen and it's all full of the numbers that she goes, those are the numbers that Uhura saw. And I was like, yes, they are.
Oh,
So
cool.
cool.
Very
So
cool.
cool.
Our podcast is kind of low key becoming, parenting with Star Trek or something
Yeah,
like that.
well, that's not the worst thing.
Nope.
Maybe in the future when we're done. Can you believe that this season is gonna well, there's still a chunk of it left, plus the
Yeah.
wrap ups, but
Yeah.
I was like, this season we're 2/3 of the way through.
I know.
It feels like forever and no time. It's like having a baby.
Yeah.
We're podcast parents too.
Well, and
Ha!
when I was editing the bonus about an hour and 40 minutes into, not my editing, but an hour and 40 minutes into the podcast,
Mhm.
all my transition bumper music was the Enterprise one that I usually use. And then it hit me, oh, I should use something that's more universal Star Trek. Wait, the Star Trek universe little theme thing. So then it hit me, oh, maybe in a future podcast that we deal with the whole Star Trek universe, maybe that would be the bumper I use. But honestly, I think I really love that Archer's bumper the most. It's just so perfect.
Yeah,
And I love that theme. So anyway, random thought.
that's okay. If we had time in our lives to do nothing but Star Trek podcasting, well, one, we'd both feel a loss. But two, do you know how much cool stuff we could put out there?
More than podcasts. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when we retire when we're 85 or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, if my computer could handle it, I'd still be putting out Treks for all time.
Yeah.
I had like 20, I think I had 50 episodes selected I was gonna do. I got 19 done. But
that's still impressive.
Sure. I did 56 Voyagers. I was nuts in like 6 months.
Yeah. That is nuts.
But it was because it was pandemic. I was at home.
Right. Well, there's a lot of things that started that way and didn't then kind of faded out. So
yeah, not the Delta Flyers. They're still going.
No, I'm really curious to see what they're dropping tomorrow because they dropped their 2 post season 7 episodes.
Yeah,
and
I
they
like
sent
them.
out something. I like them too. they sent out something saying they're going to start interviewing, and they listed a bunch of people, and I don't know if that's the order they were actually interviewing them in, or if
Ah.
that's just like. So I'm curious to see what comes in a couple hours. So,
But what are they going to interview
Whatever
them
it
if
is.
it's not about any of their work? You know?
that's a good question. Maybe they're going to sit around and play games. Maybe they're going to watch things and react. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they're going to talk to people about habits and hobbies they have that have nothing to do with their work.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I want to hear these people talk about anything really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, all
All
right.
right. So let's us talk about some of our people.
Yeah. The Carrot Crew.
That's one of my favorite things that has come out of all this.
Yeah.
It's just so quirky and perfectly Enterprise.
Absolutely is. And we want to thank you so much for spending this time with us. Hopefully you're laughing along and it's just like a bunch of Star Trek friends hanging out. Freeballing, hanging out. All right. I'm not keeping that in though. We'll be back.
I'm sorry. Ooh,
It's Dad's
these
fault.
ones are way too much fun.
Yeah. Okay.
Almost done.
Yeah. All right.